All right, well, welcome. This is the 26th call we're having for the Wharf project. This week's agenda will be a little lighter compared to last week's agenda, but hopefully still some good stuff in here. I guess just kind of kick things off. We've gotten quite a bit of good feedback since last week's release of the 1.0 of the session kit of the new website, and are working on some changes in the background based on that feedback. So there's some things in the web renderer that we'll be updating. A notable one being kind of the dark mode. That white just pops too hard. So we're working on figuring out what that looks like moving forward. A couple other minor features that'll be coming. And as we get that released, we will be putting up a blog post about that on the new website. This blog will primarily be the new avenue that we communicate a lot of that. We'll obviously still be talking in Telegram about that kind of stuff as things go forward. Um, so yeah, since last week, one of the major things that's been coming is more documentation. If you look at the live website today, it is only this antelope section, which isn't even complete yet. But this entire block of content related to the session kit is mostly done. There's kind of a session kit landing page that directs you into most of the major classes. And then there are documentation pages for each of the major classes, each of the major methods, most of the major interfaces that exist, as well as just diving into all of the other things. There's a little bit of documentation about plugin development that is alongside of this as well. The plugin documentation pages kind of start with usage, but then dive into development sections that explain the interfaces and how these plugins are structured and how you could build a plugin for your own application. We'll also put this up on the blog when it's released, and we'll be seeking like feedback for those that are starting to use it. If something's not clear, if we need to outline and like to describe something better. And then as we're getting that feedback, we'll gauge whether like it actually belongs in the documentation, because the documentation is meant to be reference material, or if we need to create a guide based on whatever it is the task is that somebody's struggling with. So this section, I expect to be getting regular updates. What's up?
I was going to ask if there's a getting started guide for web developers, not necessarily developers who want to develop the uh, Wharf code itself, but just
Mm-hmm.
develop with Wharf, like just quick
Yeah.
getting started.
Yeah, we're planning on having that in kind of the guide section, and we do have this web app guide, which is fairly generic. Um, it it was written in the context of like, here's how you could integrate Wharf with any web application, so it's not like a step by step like, oh, let's use Next or Svelte or React or whatever, and walking through each step, but it talks about all of the major components and then where those components go in your application. So you're going to need to be familiar with, your own application in order to do this stuff. But it also does link out to these popular, like we have all these example GitHub repos that show how to do it in various frameworks or how you could.
I think most people hopefully know the own framework that they're working with.
Yeah.
Um, and if it's not really Wharf's job to explain how Svelte or Angular or Vue or React work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why like if we look at the initialization of the session kit, you're setting up this object. Um, and in the design considerations, we kind of tell you where generically in the framework you're using, you will want to put these objects. Like the session kit should be globally accessible somehow, or at least accessible enough from all of your login components. So that way you can use it to call restore and log in and access the sessions when you need to maybe show all the accounts that are logged in. And then same with the session where we're like, you need to make sure this is available somewhere where you want to perform transactions. It'll probably be on more than one page, so needs to be made accessible through your application somehow. So if there's feedback on that kind of stuff as well, like maybe it doesn't make sense for a specific framework, like we're very open to that as well, and evolving these guides as we move forward. Cool. Yeah, and then as far as documentation, kind of like I was mentioning, this is all going to be like, oh, I am using the login method. I know that this is a thing, and like, what can I do with this login method? This will be your reference manual for that login method, and briefly explain kind of how it all works, and then link off to other documentation for more learning. So like we kind of show in this one, for example, that if you like, let's say you're building an application and you support one mainnet and one testnet, and you have buttons for those for some reason. Using the login method, you could pass in a specific chain and it will only perform that login for that one chain. Whereas if you just called login, it would be all the chains you supported. So again, kind of more reference material that's about how this one thing works. Same with like restore. Transact is another method that kind of has the variations of usage on how you could use it. But these aren't the step-by-step guides, more the I'm using this one thing and need to know more detail about how it works. Previously, you'd have to dive into code, and that was kind of a nightmare.
Intention to have some kind of video tutorials for this afterwards, or is that something that somebody else can hop onto?
I don't think that's in the scope, but that would be really to have. If we want to collaborate there, I'm open to it. If we might end up doing it anyways, maybe some of these wharf calls turn into some of those deep dives on those as tutorials, but I don't think we don't have any concrete plans yet. And it wasn't part of the
Okay.
proposed project, I don't think.
I think something like that might have to be larger than Wharf anyway, because you kind of want to lead somebody through a project where it's like, hey, we're going to create this really simple app. You pick the backend or the smart contract,
Yeah.
then the front end code, and then Wharf along with it.
Yep. Yep, exactly. So I'm open to collaboration on that as well. So if something like that does happen. Cool. Cool, cool. So I guess to kind of wrap that side of things up, expect this documentation to be published in the not too distant future. It's available. You can go look at the pull request on the website repo if you want to look through it. Maybe I'll even just share a link to it in Telegram for those that are interested in looking at it early. But right now it's going through like editing and proofreading, and there's a couple pages that don't have anything. I think the contexts, yeah, like all the context documentation is the code, which is not useful yet. But this was kind of the starting point to writing the documentation on our end. So we still got a couple of these pages to finish off, and then all of them to edit, and then they'll be published. This is a new section as well that we're going to start putting stuff in. These utilities are going to be the libraries that are included in the WharfKit organization on GitHub, but don't really warrant their own section like the session kit does. So like this one's about the common library. There is content maybe in a different branch for this, but it's outlining like what all these individual elements are and how you could use them individually. So another one that's going to fall in here is the ABI cache. There's a couple other minor repositories that do need to be documented for reference purposes, but definitely won't blow out to be this big. Another section that'll be this big is the contract kit. It'll have, tables, table rows, cursors, code generation, manual type stuff, as well as like creating actions and some stuff like that. So in the account kit, we're seeing as how it's in progress, but it's not fully fleshed out yet in terms of ideas. That might be its own its own full session with a whole bunch of things, or it might just be under utilities, or maybe a new header. We haven't tackled the documentation strategy for that one yet, but we've kind of nailed down what this is going to look like. The envelope documentation is also going to be ballooning out. I think this is only a third of it so far. There's other ones in the pipeline that are being written and then proofed and edited to get out there as well. Um, so yeah, this is a large focus of what's going on right now. And then on the other side of the coin is the contract kit that is still being pushed along. I think I mentioned last week, we've kind of locked down and released what we think is going to be the table MVP. There should be a blog post that will come along with that, hopefully in the not too distant future. It's kind of a juggling act between documentation and blogs and guides right now. We only have so many writing resources in the pipeline to be able to push that type of stuff along. There was a pull request merged recently that was starting a lot of the code generation side of things. We have a testing strategy now using Mocha and all the common libraries where we can actually write out a mock generated contract. This bit of code was actually generated by the contract kit using command line to pull down stuff. And it is, a generated contract that has been mocked into a file that we are now using to manually create the structure. And then the unit tests can use this mock contract that we can edit manually, um, and compare it directly against what the code generator itself actually outputs. So the nice thing is we're able to come in here and propose what the code generation should look like, and then test against it to make sure the actual code generation results in this mock. Sort of like you do with a mock API request or any other form of mock data, except this is a whole mock code base, which is definitely something interesting that we've never done in the past. So yeah, there are, I think, other pull requests that I'm not sure if they're submitted, if they're out there, but there's a lot of typing that we're prototyping right now, being able to pass in and override actions. And what this is, I guess, ultimately going to result in is how the code generator works. So when you say, hey, here's my contract and it's deployed on this network, or in your own project, if you have the ABI, you can just pipe the ABI into the script, and then it will output code similar to this. This is incomplete, that then will exist in your application. We've been testing against our rewards contract. It's one of the methods in which our team is paid. It's how we distribute tokens programmatically. And we're using that as a way to, just as a sample contract to begin with. So that way we can use this in a front-end application and be able to, from the rewards namespace, import a contract instance that will automatically configure a contract object from the contract kit for usable purposes. And the thing we're doing right now, which isn't shown here, is making it so that when you call actions or tables, like you have the contract instance, you've created it with an API client because that's all that's required. When you call give me an action, it will strongly type that and return it back to you. So that way there's auto completion, and you know what the return types are going to be and what the parameters are going to be. We're still working on assembling the type inference from that and what that all looks like. It's quite a, a challenging implementation, just because we're having to use a lot of more advanced generics in the construction of this. But the result is going to be that we're going to have these objects that will be able to, you'll type contract dot action and then say, I want the claim action. And then when you open the parameter, or like you get that action back, it will have all of your typings. Your IDE is going to pop up and be like, here's the fields we need for you to fill that out, which in this case is the account and an optional amount. Like VS Code or whatever is going to be able to infer that from the typings that come back. And then just as that developer experience, if you're loading an unknown contract or your contract, whichever it may be, you'll just have kind of that autocomplete experience. And hopefully things like Copilot and other IDE tools will also be able to pick up on this and just really help you write code more efficiently in your front end or in your back end scripts that'll interact with your contracts. So I know whenever I'm working with contract-based code, like I constantly have a block explorer open in another window that I'm referencing the ABI
Right,
or I'm looking at.
exactly.
Yeah, there's always this back and forth and it takes so much time to knock out. So we're really excited about that, and we should have hopefully a functional prototype of that soon. And that is one of the last pieces of the contract kit that we actually need to accomplish. So exciting stuff. And like I kind of started all this with, we will hopefully have a technical preview like we did with the session kit in the not too distant future that includes both of those aspects. It'll be how you read data, how you write data, and I guess how you generate the code to really implement that in your application. And then maybe in the future, if we have some like front end, back end boilerplatey stuff, like maybe there could be a build process in there that takes your smart contract and automatically generates the front end code for it as well to help with the application. It's one of those good building blocks for it all.
Can this be run in a web context, or does it have to be Node.js?
I honestly am not entirely sure. We're using TypeScript itself, I believe, to actually do the code generation. And I guess it's a matter of whether that runs in the browser or not.
It does not, actually.
Yeah. Code gen. It's all been abstracted. Yeah, we're using the TypeScript factory.
I'm asking because it's possible that I could put this into the web IDE.
Yeah.
When you build, actually, I guess I could do the same thing because it has a backend component. It'd be nice to have it there, though.
Yeah, it would be really cool if you could just take it in and do it in the client. I guess it's all whether this TypeScript printer works in the front end. And worst case scenario is there's just some backend service that exclusively does this, and hopefully it's not intense.
Well, there is already a backend process for the web IDE that compiles your smart contracts using CDT. So it wouldn't be a stretch to actually add this into that backend component.
Yeah. And theoretically, it shouldn't add any time, let's say, because like this type of code generation is so fast. And
Right.
if you have the ABI locally, the longest part of this is just retrieving the ABI. So
I see. That should be easy enough then.
yeah, cool. That would be really neat to see. It's just like working this into the workflows of contract developers. And maybe they
Right.
could even distribute this as, like let's say you published I don't know, an Oracle contract or whatever, and you wanted other developers to use it in their applications. Well, you could create the code generated code in your build process and then distribute it as an NPM package. And then anybody that wants to use that contract in their application could just include this.
Right. I mean, it's probably, it means that we would benefit from some kind of package manager in the future, which actually has a lot of this stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. So one of the things that we need to work on still that's part of this project is the discovery of these types of packages. And that'll probably be through the Wharf website. And I think we primarily were looking at it from a plugin perspective for the session kit. So, if you made a wallet plugin or a transact plugin or whatever, you'd be able to find it through the website. But maybe the scope of that also needs to be extended to these contract kit instances that are generated. we'll take and probably use this to generate code for all the various network system contracts and then distribute them somehow. Like maybe there is a WharfKit slash EOSIO package, and that would be the EOSIO system contract. And then same with WharfKit slash EOSIO.token, and that would be just a generated distributable version of the token contract, for example. But definitely
You could probably put these on NPM itself, couldn't you?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's how we're planning on doing it, and the account kit is actually going to be the same thing. The account kit will probably be the code generation version of the token contract and the system contract, and maybe the MSIG contract, just all bundled into one thing called account, and then have some additional helpers wrapped around it to more easily call those APIs based on like the context of I am this account. I want to use these things with this account.
Right.
But yeah, I could see lots of like atomic assets. That is also in the project plan, is to do this code generation for atomic assets and also integrate their API endpoints into this package. So that way you both have the code generated version to automatically type everything and access the data, but then also helper methods to go out and understand how I read the Atomic Assets API, because they have their own standalone API solution that's not part of Node.io's. So there's a lot of cool ways that we can leverage this, and I think those will start to be shown as we get into the next month or two of releasing these packages.
Very cool.
Cool. So I think in terms of updates, this is primarily where we are at. It's all hands on documentation and contract kit at this point, specifically code generation. Most of the activity is going to be happening in this contract repo or in the website repo if you want to follow that instead. And as far as the table stuff goes, there's a 0.3.4 release that's out now of the contract kit. Again, there's no documentation and we haven't done the technical preview yet. But for anybody that wants to dig deeply into how this stuff works, there's always the unit tests where you can see how to assemble tables manually. You can establish contracts if you want. That's also shown in there. And then it shows how you can do table querying, like just being able to use a table to call get and it'll return you the first row. This is really useful for things like the globals table, which most people probably don't access. But if you had a table with a single row that you just update because there's JSON in it or whatever, this would be an example of how to do that. We have a lot of the query language in here that you can see how to query with it. And hopefully in the not too distant future, like I said, there will be a preview of this and documentation to go along with it.
What is the so what is the documentation going to look like for this? Is it going to be just like the different methods?
Yes, I think that in here we're going to have the contract kit section, and there will be a table entry, just like we have session here. And then there will be get as a method, sort of like how this one's login. And it'll have a page for each of the different query methods that are available in there, as well as syntax on how to use them and explanations of the parameters. We're actually reworking this. Like right now, this is not a great layout for this information, but programmatically, this is just how the sidebar is being generated. We have plans to reorganize this that we're working on right now. And some of these will be hidden. Some of them will be more deeply nested. And it will hopefully make more sense. So that way we'll have like a table entry and then you'll be able to see get and find and query. Maybe there will be a top level entry for cursor. So that way you could learn about cursors in general. And it'll all exist here with hopefully really nice code documentation that explains what the arguments are, how you get to the objects. That way you can call those methods and all that other good stuff.
What are you actually doing? What is this? Is this VitePress or?
This is kind of custom. We're using MDX something. I always forget the name because it's a 6-letter acronym. WharfKit website.
6 letters are too much. Okay,
Yeah.
but this is MDX, so you do have like JSX possibility here.
Yeah, MDSVEX or MDSVEX. That's the package we're using to actually do all the markdown processing. But the whole thing, the actual documentation, is an implementation we wrote into this SvelteKit website where it just grabs this folder and generates the markdown based on it, as well as some front matter
at compile
that
time
exists. Yeah.
Gotcha. So the same way any of these others, like DocuSource or any of them, works.
Yep. So we're going through and writing this markdown, and then, there's the front matter to control the SEO and the title and all that other fun stuff, as well as publish status, what category it belongs in, and then we're just writing markdown.
Gotcha.
We were looking around to try to find a solution that fit all of our needs, and they all put you in so much of a box that we're just like, well,
yeah, it's really annoying.
Yeah.
That's why I asked, because you can tell that it's not like I can instantly go to any site and know that it's made by DocuSource, for instance.
Yep. And we looked at a ton of those, and we were just like, well, none of these do exactly what we want it to. So it wasn't too hard to build one, but I mean, it probably took a couple weeks worth of man hours to build it. But with as much documentation as we're doing, we wanted it to be someplace that we would enjoy working.
I understand that.
Yep. So, and then if anybody wants to participate, we have the edit on GitHub, which I don't know. I think they're broken right now simply because the GitHub, we're in a staging environment, but this will lead to the GitHub page to contribute to these documents.
Gotcha.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think that in general is most of what I have for the week. We're just like we used to be all hands on deck on the website itself and the session kit. We're kind of we're focusing on major areas, little bits at a time. And as far as the project as a whole goes, we're pretty confident that by the time the project is due to be done, all of the functional code will be released. So that'll be, I mean, it's honestly like 7 weeks away or something. And the documentation is probably going to bleed over into October, simply because we need to document things that haven't been created yet. So we will likely have everything created and ready to go by that time frame, but by the end of September, and then we'll keep going from there. There's a lot of things that we still want to do that aren't even part of the project plan, and we'll probably keep working on this long after the project's done. I don't know how that works, but this is definitely, we've learned a lot from this over the last 9 months, and like we want things like request for permission to exist in this system, and we'll probably just push forward on that. So we'll engage with the community once the dust settles with 1.0 of all this stuff and figure out where it goes next and see who wants to contribute and who uses it. But hopefully the uptake in that adoption is high. We've already seen quite a few applications adopting all of this, which is great. It's like every couple days I talk to somebody new who's diving headfirst into this.
It looks like there's it's about like 262 weekly downloads already on the session kit on PMJS.
I mean, those are I wonder how many of those are like us, but hopefully the number will continue to rise as compared to, I don't know, UAL or something. I'm sure the numbers on UAL are still steady.
We don't speak that name.
The anchor link ones too. I know a lot of people still use that one, but hopefully over time that one will start decreasing as well as people make the shift over to the session kit. Yeah, there's a slow decline.
Oh, an anchor link. Yeah, I was just looking at that one. Very, very slow.
Yeah. And I mean, part of that even might be the lack of excitement in the crypto industry. You know, this is a really long time frame. This is a year worth of downloads. Cool. I don't necessarily have anything else to ramble about. So yeah, if there's questions or other stuff you guys want to talk about, I'm open to it. Or we can kind of wrap this one up early and reconvene in a week or two.
I don't really have any other questions.
Cool.
It was an excellent ramble.
Thanks. I get self-conscious about them. I'm like, was that even useful? Hopefully some of it was.
Very
cool. All right. Well, we will wrap this one up here. So long as, I see stuff in chat that I was not paying attention to. Oh. Cool. Look forward to seeing new Block Explorer. As always, I have a great interest in Block Explorers. I built one long ago, and they're super fun projects, especially to learn how everything works.
And incredibly intricate.
Yeah. But that was one of the things I did in Steam way back in the day. And I learned so much just by building a Block Explorer, because you run into like this thing you'd never heard of before, and you're like, oh, I need to dive into this because I need to show it and render it out for whoever technical is looking at it.
Right. Like, I must know everything about the chain so other people can learn about the chain.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for jumping in. If you want to try something or you want to reach out for any reason, feel free. We have the Telegram channel. We have the GitHub discussion board, which I really wish we could get some engagement on, but maybe that's just, over the course of due time. I'm a big forum nerd, so I enjoy this long form content. So feel free to jump in either of those and engage. Otherwise, we will chat again here soon and give more updates.